What you need to know about coronavirus on Monday, March 30th. A version of this story appeared in the March 30 edition of CNN's Coronavirus Fact vs. Fiction newsletter. Sign up here to receive the need-to-know headlines every weekday. Nothing would be worse than declaring victory before the victory is won. President Donald Trump, who repeatedly suggested last week that a win was near, announced yesterday that nationwide social distancing measures would be extended for another month, days after floating the possibility of getting Americans back to work as early as Easter, which is when deaths are currently projected to peak. Trump's remarks came as top U.S. infectious disease specialist Anthony Fauci offered up a stark new estimate. Between 100,000 and 200,000 Americans could die from the coronavirus, even if the U.S. takes aggressive action. Fauci said that projection played a role in Trump's change of heart. The president acknowledged the gravity of the crisis in a summer press conference, referring to the virus's viciousness, but not before rattling off several false claims and bragging about his TV ratings. From Nigeria to Russia, leaders around the world are launching new lockdowns, but some restrictions are raising concerns about potential abuses of power. The Kremlin has now ramped up efforts to keep citizens in Moscow indoors, using authoritarian tech and sweeping surveillance. And Hungary will vote today on a bill that could grant Prime Minister Viktor Orban powers to rule by decree. And as the death toll continues to climb in Italy, topping 10,000 this weekend, and Spain, there seems to be no end in sight for lockdowns in Europe. Still, not everyone is taking the pandemic seriously. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has called concerns about the coronavirus a psychosis and joked that going to saunas and drinking vodka could prevent infection, both unfounded medical claims. Belarus is one of the few places on Earth where professional soccer is still being played, flouting World Health Organization guidelines for social distancing, and fans are loving it. What's important today? Trump touts TV ratings as death toll climbs. As the coronavirus death toll climbs in the U.S., Trump is focused on a different set of figures: TV ratings. Yesterday, the president bragged about the numbers tuning into White House briefings on the outbreak. Trump is still intent on boosting his profile in the build-up to the November election, as experts warn the pandemic is already threatening the safety and integrity of the 2020 vote. While Trump has acknowledged the peak in fatalities is still weeks away, the virus is already taking a savage toll in New York. More than 1,000 people have now died in the state, and Governor Andrew Cuomo is warning that number will grow. Amid shortages of hospital beds, New York City has set up field hospitals in Central Park, and residents violating social distancing policies will face fines of between $250 and $500. A travel advisory was issued for New York's tri-state area over the weekend after Trump backed off imposing a quarantine on New York State. Investors brace for another wild week. Global markets sank again today after Trump announced the extension of social distancing measures through April 30, a move some business leaders and conservative allies have said would be more damaging than the virus itself. Oil was also slammed by the prospect of further disruption to the U.S. economy, and with Saudi Arabia apparently determined to pursue a price war with Russia and American producers to regain market share. Economists and investors are racing to understand the depth of the recession and its aftershocks. The problem is, the data sets they typically rely on, unemployment rates, for example, are practically useless, Julia Horowitz writes. While millions have filed initial jobless claims, Amazon employees in Staten Island are planning to walk off the job today in protest at the firm's decision to keep a warehouse open despite a confirmed case of the virus there. Meanwhile, the Justice Department is probing a series of stock transactions made by lawmakers ahead of the sharp market downturn stemming from the spread of coronavirus. Read CNN's exclusive report here. Europe fatalities mount despite lockdowns. Italy's death toll passed 10,000 over the weekend, and many are asking why the country's fatality rate is so steep. Experts say it may be down to a combination of factors. The country's large elderly population is more susceptible to the virus, and a method of testing that isn't giving a full picture of infections. Faced with the deadliest outbreak in the world, Italy is fast-tracking young doctors fresh out of medical school to the front line, Valentina Di Donato and Sheena McKenzie report. Spain recorded its highest increase yet of coronavirus deaths yesterday, but it seems its infection rate is slowing. How did it become a hotspot? Unseasonably warm weather, Champions League football and a cafe culture may have played a role, Tim Lister and Claudia Rebaza report. Spain is also grappling with another scourge: black marketeers and price gougers. Big Brother is watching from facial recognition to phone tracking. Russia is using the pandemic to test new powers in technology, Mary Ilyushina reports. And it's not the only one. Israel is deploying spy technology to track patients after an emergency regulation was pushed through without approval by parliament. Mobile carriers in the European Union are sharing data with health authorities in Italy, Germany and Austria to help monitor how people comply with social distancing. And the US government is looking into using anonymous data gleaned by tech giants for similar purposes. Privacy advocates worry even more surveillance is on the way. Social distancing. A privilege the poor can't afford. Social distancing is not just for the sick, but for each and every person, including you and even your family, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi said last week, announcing a lockdown for its entire population of 1.3 billion. That might work for the country's middle and upper classes, who can hunker down in their condos and houses, preen their terrace gardens, eat from their well-stocked pantries, and even work from home, using modern technology. But for India's slum dwellers, it's an impossible task, Priyali Sur and Esha Mitra report. And that's not just the case in India. New data released by New York City shows that the neighborhoods hit hardest by the virus are generally poor and densely packed. On our radar, an orthopedic surgeon dressed in scrubs made a cameo appearance on the iHeart Living Room concert for America last night, singing John Lennon's Imagine as millions tuned in. The event was hosted by Elton John and featured performances by Billie Eilish, Mariah Carey and Alicia Keys. Formula One engine manufacturer Mercedes has teamed up with clinicians and university engineers in London to design a breathing aid for coronavirus patients in less than 100 hours. A police officer in India is wearing a wild helmet covered in red spikes to send a message about staying inside. We're home now, and like the rest of America, we carry on sheltering in place and social distancing. Tom Hanks and wife Rita Wilson are back in the US after quarantine in Australia. Nothing beats the company of a dog during self-isolation, but free ice-cold beer is a close second. Now you can have both. Authorities dyed a Blue Lagoon black to keep England's Instagrammers at bay during lockdown. Today's top tip: worried about infection from takeout or groceries. The virus is believed to live on cardboard for up to 24 hours and up to 3 days on plastic. While there's little information about transmission on surfaces, there are some things you can do to reduce risk. If you're ordering in, practice social distancing with the delivery person or have them leave the food outside your door. Try to avoid handling money, dispose of food delivery packaging and wash your hands. Unpack groceries safely by wiping down boxes, cans and containers with disinfectant wipes or soap and water. Wash fresh produce. First wash your hands with soap and water, then run cold water on your produce, as normal. As for food prep, the virus is believed to be killed by safe minimum cooking temperatures. You asked. We answered. Q. What percentage of people with coronavirus don't have symptoms? Are they still contagious? A. In one study, about 4 in 5 people with the virus in China were likely infected by people who didn't know they had it, according to research published in the journal Science. Those findings explain the rapid geographic spread and why it's so difficult to contain. Aside from social distancing and frequent hand washing, more testing of people without symptoms is essential, experts say. More than 50,000 people have asked us questions about the outbreak. Send yours here. Are you a healthcare worker fighting COVID-19? Send CNN a message on WhatsApp about the challenges you're facing. +1 34732204415. From today's podcast: am I going to be safe? Is my doctor going to be safe? Is my baby going to be safe? Courtney Coop, VP of Digital Productions, CNN, imagine the challenge of expecting a child without knowing what to expect. CNN Chief Medical Correspondent Drive. Sanjay Gupta shares the stories of 3 women who are due to give birth in the coming weeks and answers key questions about pregnancy in the midst of the pandemic. Listen now. Click subscribe to receive the latest news.